All right, good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first Upgrade Q&A webinar for the year. So just a quick reminder, the Upgrade release notes are available on our wiki page. And just wanted to give a refresher on why we do this for anyone who's attending this kind of webinar for the first time. This kind of webinar is where we show you the new features that we came up with for the recent upgrade, and also a chance for you to ask questions about why we put those together for you, and share us your experience, or if you need any help with the new features. So before we get started, I just wanted to give a few reminders about our upcoming SmartSimple events. On March 27th, Wednesday, we're going to have our next block party in Milwaukee. So we usually have our Midwest block party in Chicago, but this year we're moving it over to Milwaukee, and it will be hosted by Bader Philanthropies. So if you're interested in attending, just go on our website under SmartSimple event and you can sign up for free. Also, just a lineup of our upcoming events for the year. After Block Party Milwaukee, we're going to have Block Party Atlanta on April 16th, and it's going to be hosted by the Coca-Cola Foundation. After that, we're going to be heading over to Dublin for the EMEA Summit. It's going to be in May. We're still finalizing the venue and the date, but to anyone who's interested in flying over to Dublin for this, and of course for Dublin folks who might be in this call, mark your calendars for either third or fourth week of May. We're going to send out an announcement for it. After that, we're going to have the September block party in New York, hosted by Citi. Block Party San Diego on October 23rd, and our biggest event of the year, Elevate. It's going to be in San Diego for this year, October 23rd to the 25th. It's going to be at the Omni San Diego Hotel. Last but not the least, we have Block Party Copenhagen in November. We're still trying to finalize the date and the venue. We'll keep you posted as soon as that is finalized. We also have upcoming trade shows and conferences this March. So next week, we're going to be in Atlanta for the ACCP conference. The week after that, we're going to be in Denver, Colorado for the annual Peak Grant Making Conference. So just a heads up, we're going to have a networking mixer for all SmartSimple clients on Tuesday, March 12th. So if you're attending Peak and you want to get together with all the SmartSimple folks over there, Sharon and I will be there to meet you at the mixer. We're going to send another reminder to sign up for this on Friday. Lastly, we have our next webinar on March 19th and the 21st. It's about effectively managing your UTA and organization security matrix. So if you're interested in learning more about that, register at smartsimple.com/events. So I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Sharon Courtney, our technical learning specialist. You probably met her through your training when you were getting started with SmartSimple. She's pretty much our training guru over here. Before I pass the mic to her, I wanted to give you some housekeeping rules for this webinar. With regards to questions, ideally, we'd like to answer all of them at the end of the presentation. So if you'd like, you can type your questions at the Q&A box or at the chat box, and we'll respond to all of them at the end of the presentation. All right, so Sharon, you ready?
Yep, I'm good. All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you for attending today. Thank you, Claudine, for the introduction. So what we're going to be looking at today is we're going to be looking at some system upgrades that will be applied automatically to your system, as well as some that you can choose to enable based on your requirements or not. So just to reiterate what Claudine said for anyone who may have just joined, please do keep an eye on our wiki, so wiki.smartsimple.com. Also, please feel free to check out our upgrade webinar will be posted on YouTube if you don't get a chance to reach today. And of course, we are always available to answer questions, either the support team or myself, so please don't feel like you only have this session to ask your questions. So you may have, if you've been diligent logging into the backup to test things out, I know I definitely recommend this to a lot of clients I speak to, You may have seen some of the upgrades and changes in interface already on the backup. Those are already automatically applied, so if you did want to try out some new ideas, that's always there. But let's get into some of our updates. So I'll be toggling back and forth between our own dedicated upgrade system. So, you know, any of the elements that we'll be showing, I'll be going through how to actually put them into your own system. So let's get into it. So our major updates, the first one is the ending support for TLS version 1.0. What that means is we've updated web servers to disable our TLS 1.0 encryption for improved security. So we already previously disabled and ended support for that for most of our environments. We just had some remaining clients with connectivity issues, so we've now disabled it for all of that because we've addressed that. So that's more for your audit and IT questions rather than anything that should impact your day-to-day functionality. Next thing is we've actually updated some of our contact and organization links. So I'm going to tab into our system right now and show how that looks. So, sorry, I've just got to open this up. So from here, if you can all see from here, if I open one of these applications, some of you may have remembered in the past that we had to be in view mode in order to open an organization record or user record. So we've now made it so that even if you're in edit mode, you can click this little view organization option next to any of these. It opens up the organization record in view mode. You can toggle into edit if you wish. You can also full screen it from here if you don't like the modal window. And that's something that I'll mention again. We're really trying to push the modal window functionality. And this applies as well with all of our functionality that you would have on your standard organization record. And the same applies when we get to the contact record. So we have this here against the person. We have the option to view our program manager here. This is Mark. It's actually ahead of our branding. And also, this isn't something that is fixed. You can always turn this feature off if it doesn't work for you. So there's never any pressure to keep that if that doesn't work for you. As well as that, we've also made changes to our mobile menu. So we have updated our interface for our mobile menu. Any of you who might be curious about using the mobile version of SmartSimple, what that tends to involve is a little bit of configuration regarding modules that we would incorporate for the mobile side. For example, if you wanted to think about creating site visits on your phone so that, you know, your reviewers maybe don't have to bring a laptop with them, how we would access that is going to our global settings, our integrations, and then further down here, we can see that we have our mobile app settings. So we would configure our relevant modules. And we can also now add a background image, background color, a welcome message. We've just given it a bit more attention this time. So we're going to keep updating that as we go. But for now as well, we have some really nice lookups for your basic configuration. So tracking back to our list here, so let's go back into that application we were looking at. In fact, let's go a little further and to our submission manager. And when we open any of these, one thing you might have noticed if you're on backup is when I go into configuration mode, which for anyone who hasn't used it is a way that we can make edits to fields directly on the page. If I open this up and open a record, what's really neat about this is that when I go to my permissions and availability, I can start clicking and selecting roles to use something. So I can either click to clear it, clear my search, or I can click the drop down and hold down Control, add more members as I go, or remove them. And this can really help, you know, visualize how it works because as well, it alphabetizes it in a way that you can clearly lay out. So I find this to be really helpful personally, especially for your own configuration. So that can be very, very helpful as you go. As well as that, we have extended our split screen functionality to portal sections. So some of you may be familiar with this. If we pop back to our submission manager and we see all our records here, but rather than having to toggle back and forth between screens as you've just seen, this button up here is our enable split screen function. This is already in place just to demonstrate how it works here. We have our records on the left. We can click into each one, make changes, click in as we go. But we've now expanded this to our portals. So if I go to my portals here, my roles and security, I pick a user role which has a portal configured. I'm going to just disable that real quick and open my employee role, because I know this one is all ready to go. And I preview this portal. I can see now with any of these that I have the split screen functionality. So if I click this, that's now going to give me my different titles, and I can navigate into each. So previously this was only available to staff and sysadmin. We've now expanded it so that if users would benefit from it, they can. So that's good to know. And then we've also updated our email broadcast interface. So just to show you what that can do. So some of you may have used email broadcast in the past, some of you may have not. It's basically SmartSimple's answer to MailChimp. So with this in mind, you can actually pull up some pretty nice metrics. So under the menu again, the waffle, as some of my clients have called it, I can't uncall it that. We have an email broadcast as well as an email feature. So email is what we might use to build, basic templates just to trigger out. For example, hi, here's our news, here's some thoughts we might want you to know. But email broadcast is a little more formalized, where we can actually go in and track the links. We could also go in here, view our recipients, we can save it as an event, we can add HTML formatting, and we can also enable an email tracker and an unsubscribe link. What's more, we can actually include attachments which are stored in your system in the smart folders. If you currently aren't using them, I strongly recommend investigating that. And you can track your recipient list here, so you can exclude specific roles. So as an example, if you were going to rely heavily on this, you might think about creating a role called unsubscribe, and then you can simply exclude all the unsubscribe roles. And you can also monitor your email metrics. So here we can see all the statistics, number of opens, recipients, unique users, email open rate. So I feel like we might need to expand our user base here. We're not getting a great response. It feels like our clients might not be real in this case. And we can always, at the top, just trigger that broadcast at any point once we're happy with it. So pretty neat. And then, as well as that, one thing you may have noticed if you're really paying particular attention to the submission manager is not only do we have images available here, you can also see these little icons are now a little bit different. So we have enabled the ability to assign icons to tracking application record types. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So we go into our configuration settings, this gear wheel at the top, open this up, go into our grants, open our types, and with any of these, you can see our list here. Now we now have a new column labeled icon. So to change any of those or to add one, we go into edit, and we now have an icon option here. We can search, we can change it to say world, we can see the WordPress options, the different features, and this can be helpful particularly if you're trying to move away from very text-heavy layouts. The only caveat we do need to mention is that if you're going to do it for one type, you do need to do it for all of them, because then otherwise you'll have a little blank circle, which is not ideal. And we have enhanced our schedule report functionality. So any of you who've worked with our reporting function in the past, we now have new options to trigger a status change or workflow off returned records after an export. And we can also append a date timestamp to the file name. So these will only trigger on the primary record set. So you can customize that with a few options. That's something that, if you wanted to go into more detail, we can discuss, but just in the interest of time, I might move on a little bit from here. So with that in mind, I'm going to go into the next slide. So now for some minor updates. I mean, technically minor in the system, but for me, they make quite a difference. So we have, firstly, our simplified list view configuration interface. So for those of you who work with list views, I tend to refer to them as reporting light. They're often quite good for, quick, dynamic data mining. You can convert them into charts, shortcuts, aggregates, dashboards. You can do a lot with them. So definitely good that this is getting a little bit of attention. So now when I open up my option here, I'm going to pop back to my submission manager. And when I go to my list view, and this is a previous upgrade feature, but if I click this drop down and the list view, you can see first off the check mark, which indicates which one is active, and the wrench, which allows us to view the settings and to change them around. So we're going to go into this just to see some of the changes that we've made. So we can see the name, display order, filter if we need to. We can also edit the filter from this point, so that's nice. We have a few new view styles, so we'll go into that in a little bit. And we can also include images if we want to. But what's really nice about this is that when we get to the columns, you may recall if you've worked with these before, you used to have to enter in a number of columns and then populate them as you go, then maybe find out you had more or less than you realized, go back, start again. Not anymore. We decided against that. So instead, what we can do is we can simply say, okay, I want to add branch. So I click plus and it's in. And then while I have that, I can always click the X to remove it. I can drag and drop if I want to move it around, just once it turns into the grippy hand. And then if I wanted to maybe bring in multiple fields per column, I can do that too. So let's say I wanted to bring in my organization address in one column. I want to keep it, quite short and, concise. So what I do is I click my plus, but then if I actually click the cell, it allows me to, now I've got this new option which I can insert into the current column. So this one, for example, address 2, I can pop that in, and if I want to remove it, you can see my arrow direction has reversed. I can get it out again. And within this, I can include punctuation, dashes, line breaks, and I can also include some font color, make it delightful magenta, bold, and I can also change my text alignment. So there's a lot I can do with this very quickly, and it does help to know that, I can really revamp how this works for me. Just a quick note on that, if I do export a list view with multiple instances of formatting on it, like colors or fonts or bolding, it will not transfer in the export. The other thing to mention is, just getting back into our submission manager, is that we have a new filter availability on our date search. So let's say I want to search by a specific date range. What you may recall is that we have, for example, if we pick a date field, let's say start date, we used to only have this year and last year. We now also include this month and last month. So that means you can bring in a lot more monthly data, super useful. Only works on a field designated as a date field. So just if you are wondering why certain fields might not return this search criteria, it's usually down to what the field type is. So quick note on that. We've also extended the email preview to the invitation email templates. So it used to be if you use the invitation email, which is in the configuration settings here, we go to our grant to invite, say, a new applicant to collaborate on maybe a grant application. We can always go down to our invitation template here. And when we open this, we can preview the actual invitation. So we can preview the template here for the invitation. We can say, all right, pick a record, and it says, okay, you've been invited to collaborate for the following grant, etc. So if you wanted to put in your own, font or HTML formatting here, you can actually see what it looks like without having to trigger multiples to yourself. To add to that, we've included a prefix column, especially if someone is in the research profession, that can be quite useful. And we have now also updated our media library thumbnails. So what you may be familiar with in the past is when we get to our media library, the option up until now has been when you upload an image, it will simply display the full size. Whereas now we are able to display them as thumbnails, pardon me. So that means it takes a lot less time to load, and it takes a lot less time to kind of generate, it tiles nicer, all that kind of stuff. We've also included a new error log for autoloader. So just to show you where that is, autoloader, for anyone who hasn't used it, is a way that we can import a lot of data into our system from an external source. So examples of that might be HR feed, payment records, things like that. But where we find it is in our global settings. And when we scroll down here to our system log and summary, This is, by the way, for anyone who hasn't seen this before, a really good place to go if you face any kind of awkward questions from your IT department, from any audit people, or you just want some records of how your system currently operates. So if I click my configuration error log here, I can see now that there's an autoloader process. So if there were any currently running, they would be here. And you can also, within the autoloader, trigger emails to say success, failure, time and date, so on. And moving on from here, the final thing, super useful, is the ability to add contact card and calendar event attachments to workflow emails. So this is something I feel has been kind of pending for a long time, but if we go to our menu here and our workflows, so some of you may be familiar with this in the past. You want to send out an email, some kind of calendar invitation. Now we have something. So if we open up our workflow here and we go to our tasks, of course, this would be an email task. We can see this one here, our vastly complex workflow. And if we click this to open it, and we go to our message template here, scrolling down, you can now see the option to add a contact card. So the attachment format is currently .vcf, so virtual contact file. This is usually for users, mail servers like Outlook. So, you know, not always applicable, but definitely if you're a heavy Outlook user, this might be quite useful to you. So now let's move on to the on-demand system upgrades. So just popping back. So we're just going to move from here. And these ones are the ones that are absolutely available in the system. The only thing is they're not automatically configured, so you can either contact us to enable them, or if you're feeling brave, you can always try it out yourself. Quick note, if you would like to try it yourself, I strongly recommend logging into the backup of your system, which your same name and credentials will apply. The only difference is BK is before the .com or .ca, whatever your extension is, and try it there, see how it looks, see how it behaves. That way, if it doesn't work out, no harm done. But let's go into it. So we now have an ability to render UTA activity types in the left menu. This is really, really fun for me because I have had this question a few times. So let's say that I have a grant application and I have multiple grants here, and some of these will require reviews, some of these will require, you know, site visits, but I don't know which ones are which. So when I open one of these records, instead of, you may have seen activity list on the left, which can apply to, you know, anything really, or we can now split them out by type. So site visit, report, payment, and so on. And how we get to that is our standard fields. And once we scroll down to activity lists here, this now has this option display list type tabs on left navigation bar. So just to show you a screenshot of what that is, it takes it from activity list here and now displays them as the activities as they're labeled. So that means as well, you could think about if certain types are only relevant for certain grant applications, then you could simply not make them available and then they won't show up here. So super nice. We can also allow for a custom field, which has a really, really neat feature, just to get out of here for a sec and back into our record. So you may have in the past wanted to associate contacts in the system, and up until now we've only had this contacts list here. However, we've now brought in a new option in our contacts here. We have this availability to add contacts as a specific role just from a drop-down. So for example, I want to add another financial officer. I can click my lookup and I can say, let's take Robert and me. Oh, okay. Thanks for that. I will slow it down. So I've now selected my two users. They're ready, and once I click this plus, it will add them to my record. Okay. So now that we've got that, that's a different way we can add users in specific roles to an application, particularly if you have a large team of co-applicants, you know, people you need to have in there. That can be helpful. So with that in mind, we can move on from there, and we can go into a new ability to create a list view with multiple record types. So what this allows us to do is, it means that in the past you may have had to deal with you have one list for your grants, one list for your activities, one list for your organizations. However, now you can have them all in one go. So if we go back to our submission manager, and here in this list view, we've got a few options again. So we've got our different thumbnails. We're going to go through that, but we have the option now on our portal. Let's go to our roles and security. So I'm just going through this a little bit quickly just to get from A to B, just in the interest of time. From here, I can see the employee and their portal. Preview that. So this should be it. So here, for example, we have the action items here. So let's say I'm an applicant and I have multiple jobs to do. I have to review new organizations, I have to review people, and I have to review activities as well as grants. So you can now see here I've got the applicant, the arts and culture, domestic organization. I can expand that out and open any of these records. Of course, you need to make sure that the appropriate type is listed first. So, the type here being the type of record that it is, whereas whatever the first one you choose is going to flow from there. So moving on from there for now, and now we can get back into our list view proper. So menu, submission manager here, and then from this point in time, I can create a tree view mode for list views. So what's really nice about this is I can view all of my applications with their attendant activities and in one go. So right now, this is just a list view that you can build, and tree view is now just an option you can select. So opening that means now it splits my screen. So I can see next to each grant application, I have a little drop down. I can view any documents that have been uploaded to this particular application. So I can see my internal documents, my activities, so the different site visits, payments, panel reviews, anything like that. So if you needed to review an application in full and you didn't want to toggle between all of the elements, or let's say that you were running through an application process and you just wanted to quickly eyeball all your records and say, do they all have a review assigned, a payment? Okay, great. Let's move on from there. This is one way you can look at that. So that in mind, I'm going to toggle back to some of our other options. So you may have noticed that in all of our different list views that we now have nice big images. So we have brought in some new image display options for list views. So a few things, this is not the only option we have. It's helpful if you're obviously big on visuals, but not always the case. So from here, we can keep the thumbnail to the left as a large-ish size. We can also keep the thumbnail to the right as smaller size again. So it depends on what your preference will be there. And we can also, so we can check those from the settings in here, just to toggle back where we are. So we can see the view style can either be list, grid, or tree. And now we have the card view style, which can dictate how that looks. So we can see full image above text, large left, small right. The only thing you need to do is make sure that there is an image field within that application that you would like to use as the display image. So obviously, if your application doesn't involve any images, this might not be for you, but it can be helpful. So definitely something worth looking into. So a couple of other options as well, just to toggle back to our presentation here. So last couple of minor updates, we have extended our translation functionality. So what that implies is, up until this point, we've had to create language libraries for the kind of the default options we have. So as an example, we may have anyone familiar with, renaming terminology if you're working with multiple languages. It used to be that in your global settings, you would need to go into, your setup, your branding, and when you get into that, you see now the terminology has changed. So we have our English terminology, currently vernacular, but we can now edit the language captions in multiple languages. So you can do as many of these as you need based on whatever works for you, but this way you don't have to go to multiple areas to change this. And lastly as well, we have our new option to create global aggregate counters in portals. So what that means is, let's say you want to know how many reports overall are in the system, even if you don't have access to all of them. You just want a number of what is in the system. We have that ability now. We go to our menu, we go to our roles and security. We now go to our user roles. I'm going to just pick common just because I'm going to shortcuts. But when I open one of these shortcuts here, and I pick this one as an example, I can now see when I select aggregate, so this would allow me to pick a list view. So I'd say, let's say I want to just see a default number of companies. You can now see this option which says ignore list view security. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you can go into any of these records, it doesn't compromise that data, but it does mean that you can then have a better idea of the numbers that are running in your system. Even if you can't go any further than that, you have an idea. Okay, so with that in mind, that's it for our on-demand system upgrades and automatic system upgrades. So now we get into the beta previews. So this is where we might want to look into, your feedback. We're still working out some of the ideas in this, so definitely feedback is welcome. So we have a few new things which I'm really excited about. So one thing that can be quite overwhelming, especially for new staff members to your system, is, what's the process flow? How do we find that? So we've actually built that. So how we get there is we would go to whatever tracking application you're using. So in our case, it would be Submission Manager. Sorry, I'm just not sharing my screen. Pardon me. So now I'm here. I would open Submission Manager. And now I go into my configuration settings, the top, the gear wheel. Sorry, are you? Yeah, we're good. It's just, I'm just watching it catch up. Apologies. So configuration settings up here, open that up. And then if I scroll down to the end under General, we've now got Grants Process Flow Summary. So clicking this is going to open a really cool graphic representation of what happens at different points. So you can say, okay, what happens when something goes under review? Okay, so here's all the bits that happen. Depends on all of these different options. And I can click out of these. So again, this is something in beta, so we're not absolutely finalized on this yet, but this is something that we can always open. Second is we now have the option to open records in a modal window. So you've seen that as we were navigating through, every time I opened a record, it wasn't a light box because if I clicked outside of it, it wouldn't close. So we have the option now to open records in a modal window or not, but I generally find it's better if you are working on something and you just want to have an action to close it, so in case you don't lose your work. And finally, for anyone who is working with a lot of document signing, we used to only have two options available to us, and those were Signarity and Adobe Sign. So we've now integrated DocuSign. So if we go to our global settings, and we go to our integrations here, and we scroll down to the online signature provider, we now have Signarity, Adobe Sign, and DocuSign. So hopefully that is something a little bit more helpful. If not, it's definitely worth checking around. And that's it for our beta previews. So now from here, just for admins, we have 13 updates to administrative functions. So definitely worth having a look in here. A lot of it is kind of enhancing the user experience, enhancing options, interface, that kind of stuff. So, some of it might be very helpful for you as we go. So yeah, please feel free to check that out. And after this, I am good to take any questions.
Okay, thank you so much for that presentation, Sharon. Again, this might be a lot of information in one go, especially that this upgrade is actually very feature heavy and when it comes to visuals. So we're going to be uploading a recording of this webinar session, if not at the end of the week, early next week. So just to get by with the first question that we have right now, do you know when the mobile option will be available?
So it's available already. The difference is, just choosing the modules you would need to use on mobile. So as far as I know, it might be a little bit of work to get it on mobile, but it is available whenever you want to start.
Thanks for answering that. And when will these upgrades go into effect?
So upgrade is scheduled for this week, I think. In some of the their dedicated servers, it takes a little bit longer. So depending on whether you're on managed or dedicated, or if you're based in the EU, I think the schedule is very slightly different, but we can follow up and.
Okay, next question. Can you put a mailing list registration link on a website if you use the email broadcast?
Oh, that's a really good question. I actually haven't checked that, but I will confirm and follow up with that one.
Thanks, Sharon. Next one. I have a tree view option available to a personal list view, which enables split screen by default.
Okay.
However, split screen remains enabled when I click on a system list view with a list style. In other words, I have to disable split screen when I'm done with my personal list view. Any ideas?
So yes, I've definitely experienced this myself. So the way the system is currently operating is it follows the same flow that it would when you're using the search, in that it presumes the settings you've put in are sticky. So it's when you say split screen for one, it goes, oh, okay, you're good with split screen going forward, rather than, and it means that you would have to manually unsplit screen it, unfortunately. So that is currently system functionality, but that is a good enhancement that it would we could say just switch it back to the default.
All right, thank you, Sharon. Another question would be, do you have to add a contact tab to assign contacts to specific roles?
Great question. You do not have to add a tab. That's just for our own layout purposes. But that actually feeds into something I didn't mention in the session, which was you can also include a registration page link next to that contact record. So if you don't find the person in the system, you can register them, or you can email them yourself and say, actually, could you just sign into the system because I need us to get money. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any other questions before we wrap up? All right, well, thank you so much for attending the first upgrade webinar of the year. If you have any questions, please feel free to email support@smartsimple.com. And another reminder, we'll be uploading a recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. It's going to be available, if not this Friday, early next week. Thanks so much, everyone, for attending, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.